Well, guys, welcome back. As you may know now, we only are doing one show per week, but nonetheless, the Just Sayin boys are back. Episode 33. Myself, Sutton Smith, and Jake Osteen. Got a
It's
lot
been a
to talk
while.
about tonight.
It's
And because it's
been
been
like
a
a week and a
while,
half.
I know, because it's been a while, we got a lot to talk about. A lot we've got to catch up on.
Yeah,
A lot of stuff
Sutton,
that we saved.
Sutton and I just finished finals week, so that's the reason it's been so long since our last one. But let's go ahead and kick it off. I don't know if it's been released in the last week and a half. It might have been slightly before that, but go ahead and let's talk about Alabama's 2024 schedule for the season
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the SEC as a whole. But lead us off with Alabama at the start.
Yeah, so I actually wrote a story tonight for WVUA 23, the publication I work for here in Tuscaloosa, about the reveal, the schedule reveal. Obviously, it was on ESPN earlier tonight, but yeah, some big games just in terms of Alabama, and we'll talk about Georgia, and then we'll kind of talk about the SEC as a whole because I think there's plenty of quality in the conference, especially next season. Kind of starts off week 3 for Alabama at Wisconsin. It's a big game. A lot of my friends I know who go to Alabama really want to make that trip up to Madison. It's not really a huge game, and it's not a big game because Wisconsin's still kind of in rebuild mode with Luke Fickell. And we'll talk about transfer portal earlier or later, but they added Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback from Miami. So not a terrible looking piece there for the Badgers, but it is a different little Big Ten team that Alabama doesn't typically play. And, you're going on the road in the Big Ten. But that big game that I think everybody's got circled, and that's you included, Jake, is that Week 5 game, Georgia at home in Tuscaloosa, a 7:30 or a 6:30 kickoff Central Time, 7:30 Eastern. It's a big game. Really excited. I mean, I'm not going to be here, but maybe I can make my way back to Tuscaloosa for that. I'm sure you might even try to come.
Yeah.
Then October 19th, third week of October at Tennessee. It happens every year, but obviously it's always different when you go to on the road, especially to an environment like Tennessee. An underrated game that nobody's talking about. The week after Tennessee, we host Missouri. And Missouri's going to be returning guys like Brady Cook, Burden, and Schrader. So that's going to be an underrated game.
Oh, is Schrader returning?
Cody Schrader will be back. November 9th at LSU, another big game. And then November 23rd, the week before the Iron Bowl, which will be at home this year at Oklahoma. So a lot of big games for Alabama this year. A few of them on the road, four massive games on the road, two big games at home. So yeah, it's going to be a massive year for Alabama next season. But still 2023 is still here. We still got 2 more games to go. For Alabama fans aren't as worried about 2024 for sure, but definitely one of the most anticipated seasons will be next year.
I mean, I think anticipated just for all of college football because it gets harder just everyone in the Big Ten. The Big Ten schedules are wild. Like all of theirs are hard. You can find some easier schedules in the SEC, but Georgia is not one of those. Y'all's. I mean, you say it starts on
Ours
week
is
3.
tough too. Ours is tough.
Wisconsin. Oh, I know. No, yeah. But I'm saying you say yours starts on week 3. Wisconsin isn't. I mean, y'all are going to win by 45. So I don't know. I think it starts against us and the 2 weeks after that. Ours starts on the first week of the season. On my birthday, August 31st, we got Clemson in Atlanta. And another neutral site game. Haven't played since 2021 where we won an ugly slobber knocker 10-3. So that's going to be a highly anticipated game. Clemson's a good team. Because the thing is, I get it. They're 8-4. They're coming off a pretty bad season, but they can compete with anyone in the country. We know that. I mean, when FSU was really good, a top 5 team in the country with Jordan Travis and all their weapons, they almost beat FSU. Took them 31-24, and I get it was in Death Valley, but still. I think Clemson, Georgia's going to be a really good game next year. And then a low-key one, we have Kentucky September 14th in week 3. And then we'll talk about it. But Brock Vandagriff going to be playing with some fire. And, I mean, just that whole offense, the way they're recruiting the portal right now, it's going to be kind of crazy. I'm not saying they're going to pull off the upset, but I think it's going to be maybe potentially closer than what people think, especially because 2 weeks after that, we got Alabama, like you said. But I do think our schedule is extremely hard. I would argue it's the second hardest in all of college football behind Florida. But it sets up relatively favorably for us because we have Kentucky, then a bye, then Bama. Then we have Auburn, Mississippi State, too. They're not going to be awful, but they're not going to be great. Then we have Texas right after that, and then we have another bye
At
and
Texas too.
Yes, at Texas, at Bama, at Ole Miss. So
Three
just
really tough road games.
based off the teams, based off the matchups, very, very hard schedule. Glad we're going to 12 teams because we're not going to make it out of all these games undefeated. Just not very likely.
And
But
if
with
you
the
do,
bye,
then you're probably the best team in the country. So
yeah, if we do, just give us the natty after the regular season because we deserve it. Because this is ridiculously hard. Playing two playoff teams at their place, and then also Ole Miss, very good. Kentucky might be decent. Clemson to lead it off. But like I was saying, I think it's pretty favorable because we have a bye right before we play y'all, and then we have a bye right after Texas before Florida. And then, like I said, we go on and play Ole Miss at their place, and then we have Tennessee again, and then finish it off with Georgia Tech, the nerds. So I mean, I'm excited for it. It's like I said, going to be a really tough season, but I'm glad we're heading to the 12-team playoff. But let's talk about Florida.
Well, hold on. I want to make a one more comment on Georgia here. Like you said, ridiculously hard, but everyone's going to have to start getting used to these type of schedules.
Yeah.
Nick Saban's always been a proponent, and it's going to come up again, a 9-game SEC schedule. And if that ever happens, when it happens, it's probably going to happen at some point, maybe a few years from now. But that's going to make it even harder, especially in conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten. Obviously, the Big 12 is still going to be a pretty good conference. It's not as quality as it was before because you're losing two of the top dogs in that conference, but it's still going to be a good conference. It's going to be a fun, entertaining conference to watch. But you're right, the quality isn't going to be as good. But as far as Georgia goes, you're talking about the fire under Brock Vandagriff for that Week 3 game against Kentucky. What about the fire under Kirby Smart to start the year? I mean, losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game, he's going to want to work back to that spot. Obviously, now there's no divisions in the SEC, so you got to be one of the two best teams in the SEC to make the SEC championship game. Yeah. And sure, the SEC could have maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 teams in the playoff if you've got 4 really good teams. Mm-hmm. It's a possibility. I mean, it could happen. But you want to be one of those top dogs that makes it to Atlanta. And when that schedule that Georgia has, it's tough. And if they start off with a loss against Clemson and with that tough schedule, it could get ugly. I mean, I don't think it will, even if they lost to them. I don't think it would get ugly just because I respect Kirby so much. He's a great coach. But man, I mean, you don't want to start your season with a loss, especially that first year that craziness can happen with next year's schedule. But like you said, let's look at some other big time matchups, and we'll kind of go week by week here. I'm kind of just looking at my article that I wrote earlier. But like you said, man, Florida. I know Miami's not the toughest team, but we know Florida isn't that great of a team. Miami is a big time matchup in that state, and that's week 1.
There's 2 things for me about Florida's schedule why I say it's harder. I do think Georgia's schedule is harder the way it's laid out. If it was 2 equal teams playing each of the schedules, I think it's harder for Georgia. The reason why Florida is harder is because they're Florida. Like Georgia is supposed to cakewalk through, they're not so great teams. Like they're supposed to beat the Kentucky, the Ole Miss, the Tennessee. I mean, Florida still has to play all those teams. But the second thing, they're out of conference. They play UCF, Miami, and Florida State, which is just kind of insane.
Yeah, it is insane.
But also, I mean, they didn't draw any luck. They play an A&M team who I think is going to be good. Jimbo's finally gone, so people can try to overrate them now. I'm okay with that now that Jimbo's gone. And then also they still have LSU. They have Texas. They go on and play at Texas too. Yeah. They play at Tennessee, Ole Miss. I mean, they got a tough schedule. And people were all saying they need to give Billy Napier 3 years after this year. I mean, you really have to give him another one because this schedule is just impossible to do well against, especially when you have a relatively young team next year. And I assume you're going to be starting. Actually, no, I think Gray Mertz is going to come back.
He is going to come back.
You're going to have another young team against a really hard schedule. I didn't even mention us playing them on November 3rd or November 2nd. So that's going to be really tough for them. I don't know how they're going to make a bowl game.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, so that Miami-Florida game, big game week 1, we just talked about Clemson, Georgia. To me, the 2 that are most intriguing, seems like LSU's playing a good team to start off every year. They're playing USC in Las Vegas. That's going to be a very entertaining, interesting game because I believe LSU is going to be one of the better teams in the SEC next season. I think they're going to be one of the bigger contenders. Well, I think they get that defense figured out. And I think a lot of people underestimate Garrett Nussmeier. I think he's a really good quarterback. So we'll see what happens with that, but that should be a really good game. But Notre Dame, Texas A&M, I'm really looking forward to that game. I want to see what the Aggies look like with Mike Elko as head coach. When Jimbo's gone, I want to see, like you were saying, I want to see what the Aggies look like. And then Notre Dame will have Riley Leonard. They've also got a lot of other guys out of the transfer portal too to help him out. So Notre Dame should be a better version of themselves next year as well. That game's going to be in College Station, so it should be a very entertaining matchup.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to mention about the SEC schedule?
Week 2, Texas, Michigan in Ann Arbor should be a really good game. I've got that one written down. Let's see what else I've got here. UCLA, LSU. So LSU gets both of the LA teams. That's week 4.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, LSU gets that team week 4. Let's see here. Week 7, Florida, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas, and Dallas is week 7. So you got the Red River Shootout week 7. Week 8. That week 8, you have Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia, Texas in the same week. So that should be another really good week of college football. Florida, Georgia, week 10. Week 11, you got Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, Florida, Texas, and Oklahoma, Missouri. That's a loaded week. Week 12.
Football is going to be a lot of fun next year.
Yeah. And then week 14, rivalry week. It's going to be great. Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Florida State, Texas, Texas A&M, the Egg Bowl, and then Oklahoma, LSU on rivalry weekend. So it's lining up to be a really good 2024 schedule, and I'm really excited. I mean, obviously, we still got 2023, Jake, but it's hard not to look ahead to 2024.
Yeah. Well, I can look ahead to 2024, since we already talked about it. I'm not going to mention the playoff. Just I still don't understand what they were doing. Apparently, the Attorney General of Florida is going after the College Football Playoff Committee. Props to her. I'm pretty sure it's a woman. Props to her, because, dude, I mean, it's some type of discrimination. I don't know what it is, but you got to be consistent in how you're picking teams, and they were not at all. Anyway, let's talk about the portal, because we both mentioned it a little bit. I'll talk about it from Georgia's perspective real quick, because Bama, I mean, you can give a little insight into who you want, who you think y'all are going to try to go get, but we really don't know who's leaving yet. You can infer the people that will leave, but these playoff teams don't typically have players enter until afterwards. It happens every single year. Bama's going to on either right after they lose to Michigan or right after they lose the Natty or win the Natty, whatever happens. The day after that, they're going to see a ton of entrants for all 4 teams. But Georgia hasn't really surprised me, the people that have entered. I think we've had 14 players. It's, as you would expect, it's a lot of 4 stars who just haven't played a lot, or some guys like Mekhi Muse, who came in as a walk-on and, was getting Power 5 interest. So all props to him. But there's been 2 names to kind of surprise me. Number 1 was Yazeed Haynes, a freshman wide receiver who, in practice in the spring, and I wasn't there in the fall, but in the spring, he was looking like the best, recruit wide receiver to come in, even amongst the likes of Anthony Evans, who, played against Alabama with that big punt return. Tyler Williams was a really big commitment. But he looked the best out of all of them. And I thought he was going to be a key piece in this rotation in the future. Didn't see much from him this year. He had 1 catch for 20 yards against one of the bum teams we played, and that was it. So, and especially with, I'll talk about it in a second, but the wide receivers we're going after, I think he just, wasn't in a place where he was going to find the field anytime soon. So I can understand him leaving. And then the other big one last night was former 5-star Marvin Jones. And that one surprised me because he was lining up to be the starter. But it doesn't surprise me because, one, I've heard tampering. We know where he's going. We knew where he was going 2 weeks ago. Right after we lost, I think 2 days after, I heard something about him going to Florida State. All signs are pointing to Florida State already. So that doesn't surprise me. But also, I don't want to say he's a former 5-star. He has a lot of potential. Was the number 4 edge rusher out of the 2022 class, but has not played well at Georgia. Not at all. I think his overall grade as just a football player was like 59.7 this season, which is kind of abysmal. He had 2 sacks, a forced fumble that came against Georgia Tech, but his rushes just didn't get home. He was on the field a lot against Bama. You probably didn't even notice, though. But when you saw Damon Wilson, Gabe Harris, and Jalen Walker out there, they were the ones getting the pressures, not Marvin Jones. So that is what it is. But we'll probably see 4 3-4 more guys enter from Georgia, but I don't expect them to be big name players like last year where it was AD and Bear Alexander. Don't think that's going to happen this year. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, are you still talking about Georgia? Or are you good?
I mean, I was going to talk about who we're recruiting, but
well, I did want to say, I think having the position that Georgia and Alabama are in, they're not really in positions where the big time players are going to leave because you're already at premier programs, right? The big time players that leave typically in Alabama's case, Agiye Hall, Jaleel Billingsley, they both left because they were facing discipline issues or anything else at these universities. They kind of want a clean slate at another one. So usually the guys that transfer from Georgia and Alabama are going to transfer for playing time because they're kind of buried in the depth chart. And so far, that's what we've seen from Alabama. I mean, Anquan Barnes was a big time defensive line commit a few years ago that has already entered the transfer portal. Reportedly, was not happy with the role he had been in Alabama. Isaiah Hastings, another guy that entered the portal in D-line, buried in the depth chart. Got a couple receivers, Ty Jones Bell. Entered the transfer portal. Never played I don't think he's played but maybe 4 or 5 snaps at Alabama. But the names that Alabama fans are looking out for, we've seen Tyler Buckner enter the transfer as a lacrosse player. Pretty funny development there. But he, from what I understand, #1 player in his class at lacrosse coming out of high school. So he's a dog at lacrosse.
And should have stuck with that because
apparently he's going to play football at Notre Dame too. He's going to be probably their backup quarterback.
Drew Pine is transferring there for the spring, and then he's going to graduate in June and then transfer somewhere else. Saw that like an hour before the show. Kind of wild.
That's definitely wild. Didn't know that. But yeah, so Tyler Buckner, I guess we'll talk another guy we'll talk about later. Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. So Buckner will back up Leonard, but then play lacrosse in the spring. So, all is well for him. I think his girlfriend goes there. But the big name Alabama fans are looking at is Ty Simpson. What's Ty Simpson going to do? And what surprised me today, one of the biggest surprises of the portal so far for me was Malik Murphy deciding to enter the transfer portal before the playoffs began, because now he's not going to play in the playoffs. And I think that's big for Texas fans because we've seen Ewers get hurt already. And Ewers goes down in the playoff game. You're now looking at Arch Manning, who has little to no experience.
So I thought that was weird when I think it was today that he entered, or maybe late last
2 hours ago.
Okay, yeah. So the reason I thought that was weird, or not that weird, that must mean Arch has passed him on the depth chart. That's the only explanation, because a backup QB is not going to leave the team.
Well, here's my explanation, and here's something that I think is kind of happening, and you see it with head coaching hires, and I'll kind of get at this later when I talk about Jonathan Smith, that now the new head coach at Michigan State is. I think there are just so many. We've seen so many quarterbacks enter the transfer portal. I mean, just so many good quality quarterbacks enter the transfer portal that if you wait till the end of the playoffs, if you're on one of these playoff teams and you're a backup, if you wait too long, you may miss an opportunity. You may miss an opportunity to go to a premier team. Arkansas landed Boise State's quarterback. Yeah. I thought that was a good spot for Ty Simpson. Brock Vandagriff already at Kentucky. I thought that was a good spot for Ty Simpson. So I miss an opportunity if you don't. You go.
I see that perspective. And if tampering was enforced, I would 100% agree. But it is not at all. Everyone tampers. Every single team tampers. And so if he knows he is going to go in the portal, I don't think that's a big concern. Like, I expect Ty Simpson to go into the portal. I think he's going to be fine. Maybe that's why Ohio State hasn't really recruited the quarterback position that well. I think that's a spot he might go. I don't think that'd be a great spot for him. But teams like that, you would expect them to go get a quarterback right now, but kind of been silent. Maybe like in Auburn, because Auburn, I think that they have to have a quarterback, and they haven't really had any success. So I think that's the main explanation for it. But it's really up in. I mean, no one knows. No one knows. I just thought.
And sure, there's a lot of dominoes left to fall, but I mean, I think both of those explanations that we both had, I think are pretty, spot on in this whole process. And everyone has to remember, this process is so new that, us fans still don't even know what's going to happen or what could happen. What are the possibilities? But, as far as big players for Alabama, I'd say Ty Simpson's a big one. Maybe the reserve Richard Young, the 5-star running back that came in, who's kind of been buried on the depth chart this year. He's only a freshman, but there are reports that Roydell Williams is going to come back for a 5th season. So if he comes back, Richard probably is not going to get any time or very little time next year. I would love for Richard to stay, but that is what it is. Maybe some other receivers that are buried, but I know that this is kind of what we're going to lead into, what we think our teams are going to target. Alabama definitely will not go after quarterback. They won't go after running back. I could see them adding an experienced receiver to the receiver room. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. I definitely think you need to add a center, a reserve center in the portal, because we don't know whether Seth McLaughlin's going to come back. And you're not really comfortable at the depth behind him at that position. I think edge rusher is a place, D line is a place we could look at. And second, I really think every single level in the defense Alabama could look at a transfer. And I have a few candidates for that, and a lot of them have been favored to Alabama by some 24/7 experts, and we'll talk about those later. But I'd say pretty much any position on the defense is open for a portal transfer, and maybe on receiver and then interior O-line. So I don't, obviously Alabama will probably only take on 3 or 4 guys. That's what the best teams do. They don't take on a ton of guys. Like we're seeing Kentucky and Colorado taking 6 offensive linemen. Alabama probably won't even take 6 players. Georgia probably won't even take 6 players, and they're taking that at one position group. So go ahead and tell me what you think Georgia's going to eye in the portal.
Yeah. It's kind of what they're already eyeing. I expect Carson Beck to stay, which would be absolutely huge if he does. But I think we potentially go after, if he leaves, we go after a depth piece. Like we mentioned, Malik Murphy already entered, and he already heard from Georgia. That's just one of those things. I think he's the best quarterback in the portal. I think he's better than the rest of the options. Maybe not Dante Moore. But I think that's just one of the guys you're going to reach out to as soon as it happens. Don't really expect anything to happen with that. But some of the guys that we're mainly recruiting and interested in, especially Trevor Etienne, the number 1 running back in the portal.
Oh, I think he's gonna, when I saw that, I was like, oh gosh, the rich
are getting richer. I think he's going to end up at Georgia. That's what all signs are pointing to right now.
Man, how you like that, Nick?
Yeah,
that would be heartbreaking.
Really, we're not done with the Florida connections yet.
But
really,
gonna get Prince.
Really good back. I expect us to get Trevor Etienne. Another guy I expect us to get, number 1 receiver in the portal, London Humphreys, the freshman All-American from Vandy. 6'3" and super fast. So not like, he's going into his sophomore year. He wasn't highly recruited, but when he played the field, he looked great. Like, he had a touchdown against us on the very first drive for 49 yards right up the gut and outran everyone, even Malachi Starks. So he's really good. A couple other receivers that we're looking at, Colby Young, a 6'5" receiver from Miami. That would be huge. Would not complain about that. And then also Michael Jackson, the third from USC. Kind of some interest there, not much. And then same with Will Shepherd, kind of some interest, but not the most. I think we reached out to Chase Basontis. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. The great O lineman from A&M, but I don't expect anything there. But where I said the Florida connections don't end, we've reached out to Princely. Not going to try to pronounce his last name. He's the number 1 edge rusher in the portal right now. And that would be, he was really good at Florida this year. He was like pretty much their only good defensive player. He had 7 sacks, a lot of pressures. Like I said, number 1 edge guy. And from what I understood before Marvin Jones entered, we reached out to him, but weren't heavy on him. Now that Marvin Jones is gone, I think we're heavy on him. So that could be another piece. And then I don't think we're recruiting linebacker or DB. Also, one of the DBs I forgot to mention, Nyland Green. He's the number 1 corner, number 1 DB period in the portal right now from Georgia. Not a surprise that he left. Got absolutely buried on that depth chart, but he was a former 4/5 star wherever you look. But it's not done, because we're going to see some of the guys leave from Bama, Texas, Washington, Michigan. Some of those guys could potentially, come to Georgia. So we'll see more once, the Natty's over with.
Yeah, and as far as Alabama goes, as I haven't really heard anything about any offensive player. And obviously, Alabama's still worrying about the playoff right now. Saban's out recruiting. But we have heard a lot about defense. And the one that I've heard the most, and the one that I'm the most excited about, is Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. Oh, yeah. I think I wouldn't say he's a Bama lock, but I think it is very it would be surprising if Walter Nolan went somewhere besides Alabama. LT Overton, another defensive lineman from Texas A&M, is visiting Alabama this upcoming Saturday. And then another edge player from Texas A&M. He has a weird last name. It starts with an A. Don't know how to pronounce it, but he was a 4-star. I think he had like 4 or 5 sacks this past year. A really good piece. Will probably be a starter at edge next year since we're losing Turner and Braswell. So both of those guys are all 3 of those guys from Texas A&M look to really factor in Alabama into their final considerations. So really thinking about those guys. And then I wouldn't be surprised if we added a piece at corner. I'm not really looking anywhere specific right now, but those A&M guys I think are the highest of priorities on Alabama right now for sure. In the transfer portal, guys I'm really looking at for us to possibly sign. Walter Nolan would just be amazing. I mean, talking about an instant plug and play guy on a defensive line. He's a 5-star in the transfer portal. I think he's the only one in the transfer portal that's a 5-star right now. So yeah, I mean, an immediate dude when he walks on campus anywhere.
See,
Go ahead.
I heard that Bama reached out to him. I heard they were a possibility. The 2 I've heard are the main ones to look at are Ole Miss and Tennessee.
He's also taking a trip to Oregon. He's also taking a visit to Oregon. So
that'd be huge for Dan Lanning.
Dan Lanning might be pulling some strings out there because
Dan Lanning,
and you need a disruptive D lineman, and he's
Dan Lanning recruited him when he was still at Georgia. So
Tennessee is going to throw the bag at just about anybody. That's from what I've been hearing. The guys that they offered they offered somebody like $2 million. I heard they were offering. No, it wasn't really. And we'll talk about Raiola in a little bit. I know that's got to hurt your heart right now, but Tennessee offered somebody like $2 million, and they turned it down and committed somewhere else. So yeah, Tennessee's got the bag, and they're going to throw that bag around. Now whether it's in McDonald's bags this time or actual, we'll see if Tennessee's learned their lesson there. But definitely a lot to look at. But Jake, the one thing I've seen from this transfer portal is just the amount of quality quarterbacks that are in there. And you said you thought Dante Moore and Malik Murphy are the most quality. To me, it's my guy, Cam Ward. I mean, my guy from Washington State from Wazoo lit it up this year, despite having really no help on offense, no help on defense. I mean, the dude, I would really look for him, and I've heard there's a lot of mutual interest here. Ohio State. I think Cam Ward would be a great player at Ohio State. I mean, you talk about Justin Fields, CJ Stroud. Then they take a gap year and have Kyle McCord, who was fine, but, he is not outstanding by any stretch of the means. Cam Ward could really turn himself into a great prospect. And I think with all those really good players at Ohio State, I mean, I would not be surprised if it happened. And I think that's a place you got to look at for him. Then obviously we've got some guys that have already committed. Dylan Gabriel, think really highly of him. I think Oregon's going to continue on with their dominance with him there. I'm great get by Dan Lanning.
Grayson McCall just committed to NC State.
Yep.
Today. Yep. Kind of crazy. Tyler Van Dyke, you mentioned going to Wisconsin. I mean, it's just I love watching this happen. I love it.
Riley Leonard to Notre Dame.
Yep. We've kind of talked about individual players. Dude, Kentucky is killing it on the trail. I mean, offensively speaking, they're always going to be fine. Defensively, that's just who Mark Stoops is. They're going to be good in the line or in the trenches. That's going to be fine. They are bolstering their skill players right now. I mean, they just went and got Brock Vandagriff, a top 10 QB in the portal. They got Chip Trainum, the running back from Ohio State, who was set to start for them. Don't really understand him leaving. But
Kentucky always has a good running back, so I expect Chip Trainum to kind of go right back in there.
Yeah, and then they've gotten 2 really good receivers from the portal in Raymond Contrell from A&M. And then today, I think his name's Jamani Macklin, had 1,000 yards at North Texas this past year. So, I mean, they're absolutely killing it. Last year, it was Colorado for obvious reasons, but Mark Stoops is making a name for himself in the portal and, could be – and this is one of the reasons why I said, like, Week 3 could actually be a game because this Kentucky offense isn't going to be like it typically is. And they're doing relatively the same thing they were last year where they got Devin Leary, they got Ray Davis. But the key difference is I think you've upgraded at the QB position at least. Maybe not running back. I think, they're very close. But you're going to get those receivers, which is absolutely huge for them.
And then you've seen Deion Sanders in Colorado address the need that they have. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Adding 6 offensive linemen from the transfer portal it was very clear and obvious when we watched them this year that they were separated from other teams at the line of scrimmage, and he's definitely addressing that need. I'm honestly surprised I haven't heard more about Walter Nolan when talking about them, because it's defensive line too. It's not just offensive line. They went out and got, I mean, just in recruiting, they got Jordan Seaton, one of the top offensive tackles, took him away from Alabama, from a Georgia, from a Tennessee, an IMG guy that did not even have Colorado in his top 6 and ends up committing to them on his day of his committing. So big get for Dion, and he knows exactly where they lack. He knows he's got Shadur coming back. He's got Shiloh. He's got Travis Hunter. I mean, they're fine on the skill spots. They're going to end up coaching up those guys. Those young in the secondary. So,
I assume both
line.
I assume both their other receivers are coming back. Jimmy Horn and
Xavier Weaver. Yeah, both of them will be back as well. So they're going to be a scary
They might be decent.
That Big 12 next year. And what's funny is, the Big 12 retains a lot of the same teams that they had last year, but those 3 teams they're adding from the Pac-12, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah, especially with Cam Rising coming back for Utah, those might be the 3 best teams in the conference next year, and they're adding them.
So, like I said, it's going to be really fun to watch.
It is.
One other team, the last team I think we'll mention, Ole Miss, not absolutely killing it on the trail yet, but has the potential to. In my opinion, the number 1 receiver in the portal. I don't really know why. I mean, I get why London Humphreys is. I'm not going to complain if we get him. But in my opinion, it's Juice Wells, who had a terrific year 2 years ago. This year, past year, I think Xavier Legette just passed him up. But he's trending towards Ole Miss. Prince, the guy I mentioned that Georgia's pursuing from Florida, he's trended towards Ole Miss. They've already got the number 1 linebacker in the portal, Chris Paul, who was a freshman All-American at Arkansas. And then also, like I said, Walter Nolan. I mean, not trended towards Ole Miss, but Ole Miss is reaching out to him. So, I mean, if some of these dominoes fall, I mean, Ole Miss could be stacked on, at least on the defensive side next year. So like I said, hasn't really seen anything yet. But we saw what they did in the portal last year. Could very well do a similar thing this year.
Yeah, so definitely transferred to the SIP. That's one of Kiffin's things. And they're setting up to have a really good team next year. And they have a pretty favorable schedule. I mean, I know they play Georgia. They play Texas. They play 2 pretty tough teams. But, I mean, they can make some noise in an SEC without divisions next year. I mean, they're pretty much retaining the same team they have this year, and adding some of those pieces through the portal, through recruiting. And Lane's proven to be one of the better coaches in the SEC. So look out for Ole Miss next year. They could be a really good team. But let's kind of, as we're transferring from the transfer portal, let's talk about some recruiting, Jake. Sad development.
Here, let me lead it off.
Go ahead and address it.
So I wish we talked about I wish we had this podcast over the summer last year, and I would have given my take on camera, because now it's going to sound like I'm just saying it because of everything that's happened. But if you want, I can give you the contact of my roommates, and they can tell you what I said earlier in the season and when Dylan Raiola committed. Dylan Raiola is immensely talented, has the ability to be the best quarterback in the class. Personally, I think Ryan Puglisi, our other quarterback, is going to be better, because what Dylan Raiola is, the reason why he was the number 1 quarterback, he's fallen a little bit, but still a 5-star. The reason he's really good is because of his, just ability to throw the football, just him pretty much being better than all the quarterbacks right now. It's not arm talent. It's not anything like that. He's not the world's best processor ever. But if you can get Ryan Puglisi, who has an absolutely crazy arm, he's 6'4", runs like a 4.55, 4.6, great athlete. If you can get him into a college program, we don't need him to start the first year. So just develop him. I think he's going to, in the long run, be better. But with that being said, there's a reason Dylan Raiola is a 5-star. There's a reason people think he's really good, being compared to Patrick Mahomes. This year at Buford, he transferred. The thing is, he transferred from Arizona, Chandler High School in Arizona, to Buford High School in Georgia, to be closer to Georgia. Every time we had a home game, he would go there. And then, I thought he was the lock of all of our commitments. Loved Georgia, loved Mike Bobo. His dad played with Mike Bobo in Detroit. He played with Matt Stafford in Detroit, and Matt Stafford and Mike Bobo are really close. Anyway, thought he was a lock. All of a sudden, 3 days ago, get on Twitter, I see Dylan Raiola being linked to Nebraska. And there's always been a link there. His uncle works there. That's where his dad went. So I'm not exactly surprised, but I'm surprised that there's actual smoke behind it. And I learned, I don't know if you've seen the amount.
Yeah.
So
I think Matt Rule kind of addressed it head on, Jake.
No,
he said how much it costs to get a quarterback these days, and
if
you don't pay it.
You should. You 100% should. I am okay with a 5-star leaving a blue blood program to go to Nebraska. I'm okay with that. People don't really understand, if you're not really into college football, if you just, follow it for what it is, if you're not us, they don't really understand. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, programs like that, the brand recruits itself. You're not going to be in a battle. It's the reason KJ Bolden committed to FSU. You're not going to be in an auction with one of these other programs because one player isn't going to make or break you. It can with FSU. It can with Nebraska, teams like this. So Nebraska threw out, I want to say it was $3.1 million in NIL. Georgia is not going to match that. So it was from what I understand, I think it's we still want you, but we're not going to match it. If that's what you want, that's okay. We have our guy. Because speaking of, Ryan Puglisi, don't really know how it works. He just signed to Georgia. Signing day is next week. He's already signed. He's going to be with the program before signing day. Like I said, don't really know how it works. He's from Massachusetts. Maybe they do it differently. But I think he's our guy. I'm okay with Dylan Raiola leaving because that also opens up, a portal QB.
Well, it's also different because, it seemed as if the Raiola going to Buford was to set himself up to be in Georgia's backyard.
And it was like I said, he was at Georgia for a home game every single week. Yeah. I think he visited Nebraska once. And like I said, there's always going to be love there. That's where his uncle works. His uncle's the O-line coach there. So it was always going to be that. It just
be a first-year starter there too.
He will, because also the thing when this all was happening, it was Kyle McCord was taking a trip this past weekend. A lot of things were happening. Kyle McCord said today that he's marked Nebraska off. So that, kind of sets them up perfectly. I think, again, he's still committed to Georgia, hasn't released anything. I'm going to check while you're talking next time, but I think he still has Georgia in his bio. He hasn't liked anything on Twitter, but, at least now, if it happens, we're going to be super happy. If it doesn't happen, we're going to be super happy. If it happens, we were expecting it. So it's not, now that it's come out, not going to be super upset about it.
We'll check it while I'm talking here, but I'll say this, like you were saying about the Georgia, Alabamas, the Ohio States that recruit themselves. Obviously now with NIL, all college football teams are throwing money out. Some are throwing out more than others. And I think the ones that are throwing out more than others are, like you said, the FSUs, the non-blue bloods, the Nebraskas, teams like that. But what is Nick Saban and Kirby Smart? And I don't know if Kirby got it from Nick, but I know that Nick's always done this, and I know Kirby is the same. Those guys, when they go into living rooms with families, they'll look those recruits in the eye, and they're not afraid to say it. We will win without you. You either come on and join, but if we do not need you. We will win without you. And it's one of those things where I think Georgia and Kirby Smart, yes, they would love to have Dylan Raiola. He probably wouldn't be the starter next year anyway, especially if Carson Beck comes back, but they're going to win without him. And it's not going to be an issue for Georgia. Sure, it's a big hit to Georgia fans at the moment. It's a big hit for Georgia recruiting and their class overall. But in the end, Georgia's going to be just fine. It's going to all be in a year or two from now, nobody's going to remember this.
Yeah. And it's so funny because, like I said, it came out of nowhere 6 days ago. So last weekend, KJ Bolden was in Athens for an official visit. A little smoke there. But it's funny because Dylan Raiola replied to that saying, "You know what time it is, KJ, let's do it." So it's just out of nowhere. Now he's being linked to Nebraska. And I think he's going to.
What that out of nowhere is? It's a bag, Jake. It's a bag.
But
that's what it is.
Yeah. So I kind of want to, because we're
hit on some of your big players. Hit on some of your guys. Because I think, I even with Raiola coming in, possibly being your guy, Ellis Robinson, the fourth, That's a dude I would be
Oh,
stoked to have on your
oh,
team.
are we talking about like our actual recruiting class or who we want to bring in who aren't committed?
Actually, you can do whatever you want to talk about. This is an open
Because
forum.
I think, it's not completely wrapped up. Right now we have 28 commits. Like I
Right.
said, not completely wrapped up. We still have a couple of pieces out there that we want to get, but for the most part, this is our class, the
Yeah.
commits. I mean, signing day, like you said, like I said, it's next week. But Ellis Robinson, absolute dude.
Dog.
Honestly, will not be surprised because how it is nowadays, I assume all these guys are coming in for the spring. There's going to be a couple that, have to graduate,
Right.
in May and then come in the summer. But I think most of these guys are going to be here. If Ellis Robinson is here in the spring, I will not be surprised if he's starting. You probably saw it, but on TikTok, Instagram over the summer when they were doing 7-on-7s, it went viral. Him absolutely strapping, what's his name? Number one receivers. Oh, Jeremiah Smith, strapping him in 7-on-7s. And both of them are, absolutely elite, number one position players. But I think he's really good. 6'1", 185. He's the number one recruit for our class, in my opinion. And then the other really big guy, Justin Williams. He's the 5-star linebacker, number one linebacker. We lost to Marcus Riddick to Auburn a while ago, but right after that, we got him. So, I mean, that's absolutely huge. And then honestly, the other guy, Nitro Tuggle, when we got him, he was, I believe it was either a really low 4-star or a high 3-star, hovering around like 400 in the nation. Ever since then, he's just gone off. And I don't know, he's from somewhere in like Illinois, Indiana, somewhere
He's
in
from
that range.
Napanee, Illinois, or Indiana.
Yeah.
Indiana, excuse me.
Oh, yeah. Napanee, Indiana. All of a sudden, he was going to go to IMG this past year, but, ended up not doing that. I don't know what happened. But he's really good. He's the number 65 player in the nation now. Like I said, he was hovering around 400 when he committed, and he's just gone shot all the way up. I think if he maintains his commitment, he will see the field next year at receiver, even if we go get all these receivers, even with the ones we're returning in Ra and Dominic Lovett and Dylan Bell, guys like that. He's just immensely talented, and we haven't really signed a receiver that is kind of bona fide like that, and probably since George Pickens. So, I mean, I think this class, we're preparing for not having to play many freshmen next year. But some of these guys, they can see the field. Like Justin Williams is going to have to play a little bit next year because our linebacker room isn't stacked. Oh, another player, Xavier Sori, was kind of surprised that he entered because he was going to be linebacker number 3 next year. Ellis Robinson going to have to play the field. Joseph Jone, our number 1 D-line commit. He's number 8, almost a 5-star. He's going to have to see the field. Nitro Tuggle is DeMello Jones potentially could be as an athlete because he plays, both safety and corner. So but for the most part, a lot of these guys, they're just going to be depth pieces next year. And, we're going to have to develop them and get them ready for next or the year after next.
Well, a guy that I'd be really, really impressed to have and happy to have, I know a few guys on this list recognize because I know Alabama was going after him, but a Daniel Calhoun from Marietta, Walton High School, 4-star, 6'6" and a half, 365. I mean, that's what you want for an offensive tackle coming into college. And then Nazir Johnson, Alabama wanted him, 4.5, 300-pound D lineman. I mean, those are some really good guys on your offensive and defensive fronts to have.
Nasir Johnson is also a guy who has absolutely gone way up. He started at like 450, like less than 2 months ago, and he's gone way up. So, I mean, that's great to see. I did want to hit on the offensive line like you talked about. Honestly, Daniel Calhoun, I don't think he's he's the number 1 O-line commit for us right now. But I don't think he's going to be the best. From what I've heard, I'm going to trust it, but he's not going to be a tackle. He plays tackle, and it looked like if you read his height, his weight, he's 6'6" and a half, 365.
It sounds
like a tackle, but he's going to play guard for us. But this is like the one year where I feel like we haven't really signed a 5-star O lineman, but our class is still kind of stacked with him because we have him. We have Marquise Easley, who's a 6'5" and a half, 335. Nair Daniels, 6'8", 360 from New Jersey. Michael Unai, 6'7", 335. A lot of these guys have so much potential, and they're signing with that development factor into it because we don't need them to play next year. so that's kind of good where these guys, I'm not concerned about, them sitting this first year and then right after that, them potentially leaving. Like Amarius Mims almost left for Bama 2 years ago, and that would have drastically hurt. But guys like that, so I'm excited to watch these guys come in, battle for depth pieces, potentially play if someone gets hurt. But I'm excited for it. I'm excited for our class. I think it's really, obviously it's the number one recruiting class in the whole nation. So I think it's really good.
Well, Alabama and Georgia, I think, are in a lot of different scenario because Georgia doesn't return as many guys as Alabama will this upcoming year. So, like you said, Georgia's got 28 recruits. Alabama currently only has 21, and that is with a reclassification.
Yeah,
We had with Ryan Williams, huge number one wide receiver. I'll say this: I got to watch him play last Friday in the 6A state championship game here in Tuscaloosa. Saraland is where Ryan Williams plays. Also, his quarterback is KJ Lacey, a Texas commit, who's a junior. But I got to watch them take on Clay Chalkville of Pinson, Alabama, quarterbacked by a future cornerback at Alabama, Jalen Mbakwe. So I got to see both 5-stars go at it. Clay Chalkville comes out winners. Jalen Mbakwe had 5 touchdowns, 4 as a quarterback. So, I mean, what a game that I got to watch first off. But, man, Ryan Williams, dude, he is the real deal. I'm telling you, maybe it's probably not a starter next year because we've had a few guys coming back, but he's going to be the next big receiver that comes out of the University of Alabama. Maybe the biggest. He's the best receiver recruit out of the state of Alabama since Julio Jones in 2007. So a big deal. If I had to compare him to one player, to me, he's Jamar Chase. I mean, he really is the way he runs, the way he looks on the field. The way he just the hands, everything, route running, so crisp. He just looks like Jamar Chase to me.
I was going to ask about that because it says he's 165, and I've seen videos of him. He looks really small. Do you think that's an issue?
So when I'm watching him play, he plays bigger than he is, and he doesn't look small. Because even at the 6A game, there's a ton of really good talent out there on that field. To me, He plays bigger than what he is. It was the same way with Devontae Smith. I mean, Devontae Smith came in at 6 foot 165 to Alabama.
Very fair.
And Williams is 6 foot and 6.5, 165. So you got to get him on campus, get him, the strength and conditioning, all that good stuff. But Devontae Smith played for the most part of his career at 6 foot, like 175, 180 at Alabama. And dude won a Heisman. So I'm not really concerned about height or anything there. Now with him or with weight, with him reclassifying though, he is currently a junior in college, or in high school. So he's going to have to, he won't be able to enroll early. So he'll enroll in the summer. So he may have a late step on everything, but this dude, I guarantee you could have played for Alabama this year and been just fine. I mean, he was Gatorade player of the year last year, Mr. Football of Alabama in 2022 as a sophomore. So he's going to fit in perfectly next year, probably be a receiver 4 or 5 for us. And then like the other guy I was talking about, Jalen Mbakwe, could compete for a starting corner spot next year. Played quarterback all season for Clay Chalkville. Only took a few snaps at corner, and the few snaps he took were against Ryan Williams, and he actually shut Ryan Williams down when he took snaps against him. So he's a really good prospect that we have, a guy who's probably going to be our punt returner next year, maybe even kick returner. So just those two guys are the cream of the crop in the class, along with the quarterback, who I think is the best quarterback in the class, Julian Sayin. He did win the Elite 11 MVP. So 6'1", 195, basically a 3 or 4 inch taller Bryce Young. That's his comparison.
Oh wow,
I didn't know. And like Steve Wiltfong, I think, called him just a bigger Bryce Young. So he's another guy who should take the reins in. Once Milrow's gone, it's going to be the torch will be passed to Julian Sayin, and it seems like everything's going to be okay with that. I mean, dude can throw it from any angle, super athletic, can run, has great accuracy. Out of Carlsbad, California. It seems like all the really good quarterbacks are out of California these days.
So I meant to say this when I was talking about Dylan Raylow, that whole thing, but it kind of ties in with this. Also, I'm not the only one that thinks Ryan Puglisi is really, really good. So he was a guy, like, didn't go to camps, didn't do any of that. And then this past summer, he would just go to a university. People would offer him just like that. He went to Bama, did the exact same thing. They offered him just like that. Went to Georgia, they offered him just like that. Clemson, same thing. Ohio State, same thing. Every single school he went to would just go throw what they would offer him just because he has that alive of an arm. So their Georgia's big board for QBs, what I heard was it was 1A Dylan Raiola, 1B Ryan Puglisi. So kind of holding those two guys in the same tier. And then number 2 was Julian Sayin. And so
Yeah.
I think, I mean, barring Dylan Raiola leaving, they got their two guys. But Julian Sayin is really good. I know he's overtaken Dylan Raiola on three's site for number 1 QB.
Yeah.
It's different everywhere, but he is really good. He's immensely talented.
He won Elite 11 where he competed against Dylan Raiola. So
Yeah.
if you want a head-to-head competition, he did win that. So those are the 3 5-stars that we have, though. Julian Sayin, Ryan Williams, Jalen Mbakwe. Some other guys that I'm really excited about. The number 1 tight end in the class out of Carrollton, Georgia. So right out of Georgia's backyard, we stole Caleb Odom. He's going to be enrolling early. A corner from Mater Dei, Xavier Brown, 4-star, going to be enrolling early. Jeremiah Beeman, a defensive lineman. Amari Jefferson, a receiver. Casey Poe, a really good interior O-lineman. So we got a lot of really good guys. Jameer Grimsley could be a really good player for us, but a lot of developmental pieces like a Justin and that's another guy I want to point out. Justin Orconquo, the guy from Germany. He's a 3-star linebacker from Germany. The reason why this dude's a 3-star linebacker is because he's from Germany and he doesn't attended many camps in the United States. But Nick Saban was on the record saying this guy would be a 5-star if he lived in the United States because he's just insane. 6'3", 215, moves super fast. So yeah, he's got a ton of praise from Nick Saban, who doesn't really praise a lot of recruits like that just openly. But he's a guy that I'm really looking forward to see develop. But my one problem with this, another guy, Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. Dre Kirkpatrick, his dad was one of Nick Saban's first recruits at Alabama, and now he's going to be coming in. He's probably going to get a bump here and end up being a 4-star, probably going to play safety. He's 6 foot, 192. But he's another guy, and just shows you how long Saban's been doing it at Alabama. But the one complaint I have about this class is I want an offensive tackle, and Jordan Seaton not getting him hurt really bad because he was the main guy we were eyeing. And Alabama's had a lineage of tackles from IMG. You talk about Evan Neal, Cam Robinson, just a few to name there. But we've got about three interior O linemen that are pretty solid that we really like. But I think we're missing an offensive tackle. So I really hope that we can either flip a guy or get someone currently that isn't committed yet from this class. I'm trying to look at the rankings here just so I can see a guy because I forgot we had a name we were looking at. But that I would say of any spot so far, tackle is the one that I'm really think that we need to go after more. So we'll see what happens with that. Josiah Thompson, he's from South Carolina, but that's still SEC country. You never know with guys like that. But I think tackle is the one necessity that we're not really addressing right now.
Yeah, I mean, ours is safety. It's kind of unfortunate. I thought we were going to have 3 in this class. And then Jalen Hayward committed to UCF this summer. Peyton Woodyard, who was like top 40 player last year at the All-American Bowl for last year's class. He committed to Georgia, has gone way down in the rankings and then flipped to Bama. I mean, and I watched some of his tape. Don't think he's very good. Not just saying that because he left us and he's going to Bama.
Who is it again? I'm sorry.
Peyton Woodyard.
Oh, Peyton Woodyard. Yeah.
Woodyard. Don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
He looks so slow. He does not look very good. And maybe it'll work out in the long run. But I think a lot of other people are seeing that. And then thought we were going to be locked for KJ Bolden. We're still recruiting him hard, but as of now, not going to get him. So just safety.
You got to think a lot of these guys are going to be are developmental pieces, and these guys in high school don't get the type of nutrition, or I know they don't get the type of nutrition or workouts that they're going to get when they're at in Alabama or when they're at in Georgia, and also safety, Alabama's fine there. So
yeah, and also I mean you see guys who play one position like. I don't know. Let's take not Sammy. Let's take Malachi for example, who didn't really. He was recruited as an athlete. Is now playing safety. He didn't play any safety in high school, not at all. I think he played corner, linebacker, and he played quarterback on the other side. So, I mean, we have a lot of other positions. Like, we have 3 really good corners coming in Ellis Robinson, obviously, DeMello Jones, who's a big-time athlete, not also Andre Evans, who we flipped from LSU, has the build of a safety as well. So, I mean, some of these guys could potentially cross-train and, potentially end up there. We might not even need one because I think Javon Bullard might potentially be coming back next year, which would be insane if he does. It would be absolutely huge for us. I really hope he does. That would be insane.
Yeah. Well, just to list off your top 10 teams as so far for 2024, and we'll talk more about this when nationals or early signing day comes next week. Number 1, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, Alabama, Florida putting together a really good class.
Florida's class is good.
Hopefully it won't be Billy Napier's last there, but you never know. 6, Texas, start with a nice class. Miami at 7, Oregon at 8, Oklahoma at 9, and Notre Dame at 10. So
hey,
your usual suspects in the top 10.
Shout out to South Carolina though, with number 17, and they have 2 5-stars. And I think Dylan Stewart.
Shout out to Missouri too. Being able to keep some of their in-state guys home, like Williams Nwaneri or whatever that guy's name is. Yeah. Shout out to them keeping some of the really top players from in-state.
And they did that before they were, super good.
Yeah.
Their recruiting class is, like, honestly kind of terrible. It's not very good at all.
But they're going to be a team that looks in the portal, and they're going to be a team that capitalizes off really good recruits like that. So,
but they have Williams Nwaneri, who is, potentially the number 1 player in this class. There's a lot of potentially number 1 players. I think it's Williams Nwaneri, Ellis Robinson, and Jeremiah Smith. Those are the 3. I think they're the 3 best in this class for their position. But Williams Nwaneri is he's 6'6" and a half and 260, and is just a freak. He's so good.
And I think this class is really headlined by a lot of really good talent at receiver. I mean, you were just talking about Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Wingo, really good player that's going to end up at Texas. Cam Coleman, I mean, from Central Phoenix City, going to go to Auburn. Hate Alabama, missed out on him, but really he never had Alabama even in his sights. What it sounds like. Ryan Williams, Alabama, right now. Let's see, Micah Hudson.
Micah Hudson going to Texas
Tech. 5-star going to Texas Tech. Good pull for them. Another guy that I just saw a minute ago is Perry Thompson, another receiver going to Auburn. Mike Matthews going to Tennessee. I mean, we just listed 5 or 6, maybe even 7 receivers in the top 25. So it's a heavy receiver class. Oh, and Bryant Wesco to Clemson, a 5-star.
There's 10 5-star receivers in this class.
And that's really crazy. I mean, that's a lot of talent there and a lot of quality. So I mean, I think those are the big takeaways that I've had just from looking at this class. And then you've got your 2 big time quarterbacks in Raiola and Sayin. So those are some guys. And I wanted to give a shout out too to a kind of an underrated running back that Georgia has, Nate Frazier, a guy that Alabama wanted, underrated for Georgia. And then Alabama still didn't have a running back commit in this class. So they were actually looking at Kevin Riley from Tuscaloosa County right here. Currently a Miami commit, hoping to flip him and just sign a running back in this class.
Yeah, you mentioned running backs, and like I said, we're going to probably get Trevor Etienne. We have 3 running backs for next year's class. I mean, we're set to depart 2 of them. I expect maybe 1 to transfer as well, like I don't know who, Cash Jones, maybe Roderick Robinson after his freshman year. But we have Dwight Phillips, Nate Frazier, and Chauncey Bowens, the former Florida commit. And then also going to bring in Trevor Etienne. So that, the running back depth is going to go from, kind of abysmal at the start of last year or this year to being absolutely stacked here shortly. It's going to be fun.
We saw that with Alabama in 2021 when everybody was getting hurt, and then we just reloaded in 2022. So,
yeah.
Then another quarterback I forgot to mention in the top 25, DJ Lagway, the Florida guy. I mean, absolutely insane high school year. So he's got a ton of promise ahead of him. But there are reports, Jake, that he's thinking about not going to Florida. So should be interesting if Lagway ends up going somewhere else. I mean, I don't really know.
I mean, I've heard a little bit about, potentially, but like I thought he was kind of dead set. I thought he saw him tweet something today.
I've heard that he likes Baylor.
Baylor. Oh, Dude, if Billy Napier loses DJ Lagway, I
I've
think he
also
will.
Baylor and LSU. That's what I'm looking at right now. Baylor and LSU. Yeah.
Yeah, if they lose him, it's not going to be long before
I'll
Billy
be
Napier.
honest. I think, and I don't want to put too much pressure on a kid like that, but I mean, a lot of Florida fans, like let's say Mertz starts next year and they go 6-6 or 5-7. A lot of Florida fans will be willing to give Billy Napier another year due to DJ Lagway. I
That's
mean,
what I'm saying. So
them
if
pulling
he's
him in,
gone,
that's a big pull, you
if
know.
he's gone and you don't do well next year, I think it's
But you
wraps.
have to look forward to, you know. So
So,
I
but
think it's
speaking
big
of
for Nick and those Florida Gators down there in Gainesville.
speaking of coaching changes and coaching hires and fires, let's just briefly talk about some of the big ones that have happened in college football so far.
I've got eight coaches that I really look at as being well, I wouldn't call I want to start off with Fran Brown because I know you have familiarity with him. I wouldn't necessarily call it a big coaching hire because he is going to Syracuse, but he did win it over Toledo's head coach, which led him to an 11-2 season this year. And Fran Brown's never been a head coach before. He was a DB coach.
So
Tell me a little bit about Fran Brown.
we're not looking at it as an absolute powerhouse. He is not going to make Syracuse a playoff team. That's not reasonable. But I think Fran Brown is destined to be the number two big head coach from the Kirby Smart tree that he's starting to build. Number one being Dan Lanning. I think Fran Brown is shortly to follow that because Fran Brown was an absolute dude. I mean, he got us into rooms and even he's a DB coach, but he was leading some of the recruitments for wide receivers, for linebackers, for other defensive players. It was just crazy the rooms he would get us in. He has a lot of connections up there in the Northeast. So he's going to dominate recruiting at Syracuse. And we've already seen it. He flipped a Texas A&M commit, a wide receiver commit. He's already committed to Syracuse. There's some other guy. He was a pretty high 4-star. Let me look at their recruiting class. But it was a pretty high 4-star recruit, just committed to Syracuse. Got King Joseph Edwards, who was, he's another player that was super highly recruited last year and then has dropped in recruiting rankings, but that'd still be pretty huge. And then also on that visit, he got KJ Bolden to come with him, which again, he's not going to get him, but still just kind of crazy. But Fran Brown is a tremendous coach and is a tremendous recruiter, all of that involved. And I think like I said, he's not going to make Syracuse a playoff team, but he can make them an ACC championship winning team, especially how, the Big 10 and Big 12 and SEC are kind of bolstering their teams, except for, of course, Oklahoma and Texas leaving. ACC, shortly going to follow Pac-12 potentially. I don't think it's going to be too hot. But also he's making noise in the portal. There's been a lot of guys to, go visit him. Jackson Meeks, a receiver from Central Phoenix City that went to Georgia, was a key contributor on special teams. He just committed to Syracuse. Yazid Haynes, who I mentioned earlier, he's on a visit there this weekend. Mekhi Muse just received an offer. I know a lot of these Georgia players. I don't want to say he's poaching them, but he's giving them calls. And no doubt, him and Kirby were close. Fran Brown was a great guy. Dude, at the start, so where he came from was Rutgers. He was their DB coach. We found him there, brought him here. For the first 2 months, I believe he slept in his office because I would be in there at like 8, 9 p.m. And then I would see him just walking in the halls. I'm like, where are you going, coach? He's like, I'm living here for now. And he didn't leave the office for 2 months. And partly that's just because he didn't have an apartment. But I mean, he's that kind of worker. And so I think Syracuse found an absolute gem. I don't think they're going to have him long. I think as soon as, a bigger Power 5 spot opens up in the next 1-2 years, I think he's going to, go into that job. So like I said, it's a tremendous hire. It's great. Sucks for us because, we're going to have to replace that DB coach. But, all props to him.
Yeah, happy for a guy like that. Happy for a guy like Fran Brown. And before we know who the number one is. We know who everyone wants to hear. That's Mike Elko. But I want to go to another up and riser before. That's John Sumrall going from Troy to Tulane, taking Willie Fritz's job, who we'll talk about a little bit later, going to Houston. But I think if not, I think that might be an upgrade for Tulane. I mean, we've seen Troy won their conference this year in his second season there. They ended up going 11-2 with a conference win. And obviously his press conference made a lot of talk in the college football world. And he said, we're going to make the college football playoff and we're going to win it. Talking about he's going to win it at Tulane. We all know that's not going to happen, but way to set the bar there, Coach Sumrall. But I expect Tulane to be just as good, if not better, than what they've currently been under Willie Fritz. Tulane's a good spot. They've always been a pretty good Group of 5 team. They've been able to recruit pretty well up against some Power 5 teams. They're in a pretty good spot there in New Orleans, Louisiana. I mean, that city can recruit itself sometimes. So I expect still the same thing from Tulane. I expect John Sumrall to only be there 2, maybe even 3 years before he gets an SEC or a Big Ten job. I mean, he's on his way. So congratulations to John Sumrall there. But Jake, I want to hear your opinion on Mike Elko and Texas A&M. I'll be completely honest with you. I was not completely blown away with this hire. I thought it was a fine hire, but to me, it was not that just out of the ballpark hire. I think he'll be better than Jimbo Fisher, but I want to hear what your instant reaction was. His name was thrown around a lot with Texas A&M. I think a lot of people saw this coming, but I don't think it was the out of the ballpark hire that a lot of people will claim that it was or say that it wasn't. I tend to be in that crowd that it wasn't.
I agree 100%. I'm all for firing Jimbo Fisher. I think they're going to be better because of it. I think they're going to be a top 25 team now, and I'm going to be okay with them putting them in the top 25 just because that Jimbo's gone until they prove that they shouldn't be there again, which they probably will be. But I 100% agree. I think the Mark Stoops hire was better. I think we talked about that. I'm not sure. So when it dropped, I was like, wow, that's kind of scary because we've seen what Mark Stoops is doing in the portal. We're seeing what he's doing at a basketball school. Kentucky is not supposed to be beating potential teams. They're not supposed to beat a Penn State in the Citrus Bowl. No, I don't. 2019, 2018. I don't know what bowl they played in, but Kentucky is not supposed to get 10 wins in a season. I get it. He hasn't been extremely consistent, but again, he's coaching at Kentucky. So I think they kind of sold with leaving him, and because it just wasn't signed that everything else was good. They were gonna, conjoin with each other, and then all of a sudden it got out, and 1 hour later, you can see all the backlash from. I think it was donors. We saw all over Twitter, all the fans hated on it. I'm pretty sure it was the donors that didn't like it and kind of forced Texas A&M to go a different way and get Mike Elko. Like you said, I think it's a decent hire. I think he will be better than Jimbo, but I think they missed out on a potentially bigger hire with, the more boring name and Mark Stoops. So, I think A&M's not going to be better in the long run for it. But, in the short run, it's definitely way better than Jimbo.
Well, I'll say I think Texas A&M fans cannot blame anyone if this doesn't go wrong because they've been mad at their AD. They've been mad at their school president for hiring Kevin Sumlin, for hiring Jimbo Fisher. Well, you were going to go out and hire a guy who's proven it at a school that he should not be proving it at, like you said, in Mark Stoops. And the fan base rioted. They pretty much said, we do not want this guy. And the school listened. The school listened for once. So if this doesn't work out in Texas A&M fans' favor, they have no one to blame but themselves. And I think the person or entity that got the best deal out of all this was Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky is probably just thrilled that they got Mark Stoops back. I mean, they would have, even if he signed the dotted line and then ripped it up, they would have welcomed him back with open arms like the prodigal son. Because what he's done at Kentucky is really unprecedented, and he's had to do it a different way. He hasn't done it through recruiting. He's done it through transfers, grad transfers, less talented players that he's developed. And we talked a little bit about him going to A&M, and I had some issues with Stoops going to A&M because he hasn't ever really had to recruit crazily well to win at Kentucky. It would have been a completely different job for him going from Kentucky to A&M. He would have been expected to compete with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and Steve Sarkisian in living rooms across the United States. And I don't think that is, because A&M they've got some of the most money. They should be a contender for the money that they have, but that's a tall task going in there and selling your program against a coach like Nick Saban or against a coach like Kirby Smart, especially as of late. So I think Elko would have been a better hire than Stoops just because I think he's an up and coming coach. I think he can maybe relate to players more. I'm not sure. He was able to do a lot more with less at Duke. I think he's a pretty solid recruiter. I mean, he's recruited some pretty good guys over his career. He's a good offensive mind. He's kind of coming up. So I like what Mike Elko is. I just think the slam dunk, hire that A&M possibly was looking for resided at a different school. I don't know who that was. I don't know. You're not going to hire Nick Saban. You're not going to hire Kirby Smart. They threw a bunch of money at Kirby, but we all knew Kirby was going to stay strong. And who's going to want to leave their alma mater? I just don't see that happening. I think there could have been some more sexy hires out there, that you could have had, like a Lane Kiffin. I don't know, but I think Elko will do a better job than Jimbo did. I think the team will end up being better for it. But I still don't think A&M is going to win a national championship under Mike Elko. They may have a year where they're a 10-win team. They may produce some really good players, but I still think that Mike Elko will be a good coach, but he'll be good. He won't be great. That's kind of my prediction for him at Texas A&M. And shoot, they may clip that right there. Probably not, because nobody will probably ever hear that. But they may clip that and put that on a hype video if they win a national championship game. But that's just my prediction. That's how I feel.
Hey, if they clip Just Saying of you saying that and put it in a hype video after they win the Natty, that means we've made it.
Hey,
so
just to let you know, Texas A&M, I trademarked this. We're gonna trademark this Just Saying with Jake Osteen and Sutton Smith. So if you use it in a hype video, you're gonna owe us some money. That's the least you could do. So
hey, we actually should. So if it happens, we can earn millions.
Maybe. But I want to talk to you about another guy, Jonathan Smith. I mean, it was pretty obvious that I thought he was going to leave Oregon State, especially with him leaving the Power Five. But to me, and yes, there's not many great head coach openings, but Michigan State to me is a lateral move from Oregon State. It's going to be tough to compete. I know it's a national brand. I get all that, but it's going to be tough to win at Michigan State, especially in this new Big Ten, competing against Michigan and Ohio State for players everywhere. I think Jonathan Smith actually would have been a perfect hire at A&M. Jonathan Smith at A&M would have been their best hire that they could have had. But Michigan State, it's just so hard to compete with because they have inferior buildings. They have inferior programs in Michigan to Ohio State. It's kind of like Penn State, but worse than Penn State to me. And I think Jonathan Smith might actually be the best coach of the four. He might be a better coach than Jim Harbaugh or Ryan Day or James Franklin. I mean, you give him the reins at Ohio State. If Jonathan Smith was born on third base, he might be. If there was a fifth base right now, he might be standing on fifth base with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. So that's how great of a coach and how much I revere him as a coach. But I hope it works out, because if he doesn't do well at Michigan State, he's going to have to go down the ladder again and have to try and climb back up. But I just don't know how Michigan State's going to work out.
Yeah, I don't think it was a lateral move. You could have sold me on that if it was college football again this year, how it is. But next year, completely different conferences. They're no longer a Power 5 team, Oregon State. So, I mean, recruiting was about to get a lot harder. Your chance of a playoff go immensely down. And that's why I think a lot of people are leaving, because it's no longer a Power 5 team, which sucks. Only two teams can say that, them and Washington State. Now going to go play in the Mountain West. Are they playing those? Okay. But so that's the one reason I don't think it was a lateral move. I think it's a W for Jonathan Smith. I don't think he has to win there. I think he just has to, potentially compete to potentially go to a better team. Like at A&M. Maybe they just want to see what he can do at a more of a national brand, because Oregon State, they're always going to be the underdog. Michigan State was in the playoff. I know it was a while ago, but one of like 16, 17 teams to have been in the playoff. I don't know how many it's been. So, I mean, they're more of a national brand. I think he has to just go compete against the ridiculously hard schedules they're going to have to play in the future. But like you said, they're not going to be able to, I don't want to say compete, but they're not going to be able to consistently beat the teams like Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, and now USC, Washington,
UCLA, Oregon. Yeah.
UCLA, I think they could compete against, but Oregon. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think they're going to win against those teams consistently. But if you can prove yourself to be a good coach and compete and get your guys ready week in, week out, I think you can make yourself some money.
No, yeah, you're right. You're right about that, and that's a really good point. So I'll definitely take that with me. Trying to think, I had something I wanted to say about Jonathan Smith, but
How
uh,
there's how he sold his or gave his clothes to Goodwill and
that was
they're
funny. That was
there.
good. But I did want to say that this was what I was going to say about Texas A&M. I didn't even realize it till a second ago, but they just hired Mike Elko from Duke. They were looking at two head coaches from basketball schools coaching football. It's kind of
Yeah,
funny how that ended up happening. But let's go to Duke. Manny Diaz getting another opportunity to be a head
huge,
coach in the
huge.
ACC. Another guy, Jake. I'm going to say it, and it sucks. Some people are just cut out to be really good defensive coordinator, and they're not cut out to be head coaches.
So
Manny Diaz is one of those guys.
I agree 100%.
Jeremy Pruitt, one of those guys.
The reason I say huge is not for Duke's benefit; it's for Penn State's detriment. It is huge
Yes.
in a wrong way that he's leaving Penn State. Because I was talking to my roommate Josh about it, who's a diehard Penn State fan. It sucks because he's a really good defensive coordinator. He can get his defense ready. He's proved that year in, year out. He's just not a great head coach. I don't know what it is. Maybe things can change at Duke. But I mean, he kind of started this downward trend with Miami, where Miami is now overrated every single year. They're going to continue to be. But he wasn't born on third base there, but he inherited a really good team there, and just didn't do anything with them, and hasn't done it. I don't know where else he's been a head coach,
I
but
don't think anywhere else. No, I
was
don't
that his only head coaching
I
job,
think so.
Miami?
Imagine your first head coaching job being Miami.
Yeah.
That's
So I don't think it's the worst ever hire. I think you could have gotten worse. You could have gotten better. But I think we're gonna and maybe Manny Diaz learned a lot from his time at Miami, and especially being with James Franklin, who's a really good coach. Maybe he's learned a lot, and he's going to coach in the ACC, which we know is not very great. So maybe he can make some noise, but especially with a depleted roster with your quarterback leaving, don't really know how it's going to work out for him.
yeah, and I mean, like I said, I think Jeremy Pruitt's one of those guys who just Manny Diaz, brilliant defensive mind, brilliant motivator of men, great coordinator. But some guys, when they step into that head role, they're just not for it. I mean, and it happens, and there's nothing to hang your head about. I mean, you've got some really good Mike Bobo, one of them. I mean, he had some success at Colorado State, but has much more renown as an offensive coordinator. So
I think, yeah, you're going to see this in a lot of older coaches who are still offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. And some of these 50, 60-year-old coordinators
Kevin Steele, Alabama defensive coordinator.
Todd Monken, absolute stud in the college ranks and is now doing really well at Baltimore Ravens as an offensive coordinator. Don't think he would ever make a great head coach, whether it's in NFL or college. So some of these guys just realize it, and maybe Manny realizes it after this and just becomes to be one of the best defensive coordinators the game has potentially seen. Who knows? But I think we're going to learn a lot in the next 2 years at Duke.
I don't know if you saw Manny Diaz and the Cameron Crazies at Cameron Indoor at Duke. He was in the student section. It's very interesting. You need to go look the video up. But another guy that we haven't really talked a lot about, guy making his first head coaching position ever, from offensive coordinator at Oklahoma to now the head coach at Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby. I said I kind of saw this coming. I thought either Jeff Lebby or Rhett Lashley would be the guy at Mississippi State. They ended up going with Jeff Lebby, who has said that he's going to bring back the Mike Leach offense. So I know Mississippi State fans are really happy about that. T's and P's to Mike Leach there. But I think Jeff Lebby's going to do really well at Mississippi State. He's already found his quarterback for next year. Don't really know how to feel about it because he was at Baylor. Blake Shapen, fifth-year senior from Baylor. I watched some tape on him. He's got a good arm. He needs to get better between the head, I think. He's not going to stand out, just insane athletic guy. But, a guy that Jeff Lebby, I think, could really run the air raid offense with. I mean, they're going to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game. Blake Shapen's arm looks like it could hold up for that type of offense. It's going to be tough, especially in the new SEC. It's going to be tough for every new head coach that comes in, especially at Mississippi State, where you're really not expected to win. You're just really expected to compete. And that was the problem with Zach Arnett and whatever they had going on for a year there. That was a terrible decision, I thought, to hire him. But I'm really rooting for Jeff Lebby. I hope that stuff goes well for him. He's a brilliant offensive mind, a brilliant young guy, an up-and-comer in the industry, I think. So we'll see if he can turn around Mississippi State a little bit, maybe have him back in those Dan Mullen era years where they were really good in the early 2010s.
Yeah, I think it's a really good hire. Again, nothing like too spectacular, not going to break the bank. But I think you hit a triple, maybe hit a double, hit a triple, maybe not a home run, but I mean, I think Jeff Lebby's good, and you potentially, even if he doesn't have a ton of success, I think this might start his success in the future because he's a really young guy. I don't know exactly how old he is, but I know he hasn't been coaching for too long. But that's pretty much all I have to say about him as a coach. But it was funny. I don't know if you saw. I think it was shortly after they hired him. It was so funny on Twitter. There was a picture with him with Arch Manning when he was the Ole Miss OC, and people were putting it out on Twitter, acting like it was a couple of days right after he got hired, and people were like, "Oh, Arch to Mississippi State confirmed." Oh, it was so funny.
Oh, it got me.
Texas fans were going crazy on Twitter because he had an Ole Miss logo and people just didn't zoom in to figure it out. But you had Texas fans being like, "Oh no, our season's or our future's ruined. Arch is going to Mississippi State. Oh no, oh no." It was so funny.
Well, and I wanted to bring that up too. His familiarity with Lane Kiffin. Going to Mississippi State, Lane Kiffin will be on the other side of the Egg Bowl. So that's another thing Mississippi State fans can look forward to. Those Egg Bowls are going to be very entertaining with two really good offensive-minded head coaches. So definitely something to look out for there. Two more head coaches I wanted to mention, but just briefly before we get out of here. Kurt Cignetti, the head coach from James Madison, got the job at Indiana. So another Big Ten program there that looks to be on the up and rising. And they got a pretty good coach. He's an older guy, but could definitely make some noise there in Indiana. You never know. Another basketball school. Maybe they turn into a football school for a year or two. Who knows? And then the guy that we touched on a little bit earlier, Willie Fritz, leaving from Tulane to go to Houston. I think this is a better job. To some, it would seem a lateral move because Houston, a basketball school, but they're in the Big 12 now. So he's going from the Group of 5 to the Power 5 ranks. I say it's a step up the ladder from where he was from. Another older guy. So we'll see how Willie Fritz does at Houston. Dana Holgerson left there, kind of was never really good there. I mean, I really thought Dana Holgerson leaving West Virginia back in the day was a mistake because he was really good at West Virginia. We'll see if Willie Fritz can revive that program there in Houston, but they definitely have potential. I mean, being in the state of Texas, now being a Power 5 team, they can get some recruits there. And with the Big 12 being down now without the big dogs like Texas and Oklahoma there, maybe Houston can make some noise in the future. So, I mean, I think those are 8 pretty big time head coaching changes. Obviously with Elko being the biggest one, Jonathan Smith, Jeff Lebby. So college football look a little bit different next year, a little bit different in the SEC and in the Big Ten, without even talking about conference realignment. But so we touched a lot of different bases tonight, Jake. We had transfer portal, coaching, crazy.
For the first time, not talking about games.
Yeah, no games. Maybe a preview of what's to come in the offseason a little bit. We'll do one show a week from here on out. May do 2 for bowl season. There's going to be a lot of bowl games to break down, so we probably will do maybe 2 or 3 for the bowl games just to break all those down. But once the offseason comes, be prepared for the 1 episode a week. But a lot of content in that 1 episode, since we won't be.
I mean, this month we're going to do, for the most part, once a week. But I mean, there's still going to be a whole lot to talk about because I figure there's going to be some, big flips next week for National Signing Day. Some bigger guys who maybe didn't sign who were supposed to. So going to have a lot to talk about that. And, maybe there's not as much and we can hit on some of the bigger bowl games next week. But I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing your take about some of the bowl games. There's a lot of fun ones. Like the one I'm looking forward to is Penn State Ole Miss. I think that one's going to be so good.
I'm looking forward to. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't anticipate a lot of opt-outs. I think Penn State's going to have Olu Fashanu and potentially Chop Robinson, and that might be it. Ole Miss probably going to have a couple. But, I mean, it's going to be a lot of familiar faces, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, another one that I think is just interesting, not in terms of just like fun to watch. No. I was saying USC versus Louisville. I mean, you cannot get any opposite teams. Yeah. I mean, you cannot, but you can't get.
Louisville is not fun to watch.
Louisville's not. That's what I'm saying. You couldn't get 2 more opposite teams on the field. I feel like maybe Iowa USC would be the most opposite.
No, I would refuse.
Who is Iowa playing? They're playing somebody that's like that's pretty solid.
Let's see.
I forgot who they're playing, but
They're
yeah,
gonna get embarrassed.
I really can't wait to break down some of those games. But another fun name, the Pop-Tart Bowl, and the mascot is actually an edible Pop-Tart. Like someone's walking around inside of an edible Pop-Tart.
No way.
Should be, and they're gonna they'll, instead of doing like the Gatorade bath, there'll be a Pop-Tart bath. That's kind of cool. So for the coach, like they do with the Cheez-It Bowl. So I think that should be a pretty interesting little side gig there of a football game. But yeah, there's many bowl games that we're gonna break down.
I was playing Tennessee.
So, oh goodness, yeah, like that. Joe Milton versus the Iowa defense is going to be just great to watch. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to watch.
They're gonna have to put Nico in. They're gonna have to.
Oh, dude, it's gonna be gross. But expect to hear from us again next Wednesday night. We want to do a recruiting and early signing period breakdown show. I think we might just do that. Like that might be the only topic we talk about, because there'll be so much to talk about, not only with the Alabama and Georgia classes, but college football in general.
Yeah.
Because basically early signing period is now signing day. Everyone does early signing period so they can enroll early for their team's bowl prep. So we'll talk about that next week. But that's it for tonight for episode 33 of the Just Sayin Podcast. So get us out of here, Jake.
Yep. Hey, go subscribe. We got a lot coming for you, even when we're in the off season. It won't stop. We're still going to be meeting once a week talking about it. So go subscribe, tell your friends about us. And from that,
tell them about our surprise guest that we're probably going to have on in the off season that we got to look forward to.
No, you tell. I don't know anything about it. You got to tell us.
There's rumors going around.
What's going on?
There's rumors going around that Pate State might be making an appearance on the Just Sayin podcast.
Are these rumors or are these solidified?
These rumors have been discussed with Pate State, with the proper authorities at Pate State. And I'm actually hoping, since the name of our podcast is Just Sayin, I'm hoping to have Julian Sayin on this. I have reached out. We'll see if we get comment back. We'll get some comments back, but could be joined by the future quarterback of the Alabama Crimson Tide.
That'd be kind of cool.
That'd be pretty dope. So we'll have to see for future reference if Mr. Julian Sayin joins the podcast. Maybe you can bring a Georgia recruit on. I don't know. Maybe a Georgia recruit of your choice. Maybe
we'll see what I can pull.
Maybe we could have Dylan Raiola commit live on the Just Sayin podcast next week.
That would be something else.
Just to see if he can commit to Georgia.
Just to pull off the Nebraska hat. Yeah, I'd kick him out of the Zoom.
That'd be the biggest troll ever. But maybe you can get us, I don't know, Ellis Robinson or somebody from maybe.
Yeah. Let me just go hit up Ellis.
Let's just get both of our quarterbacks on at the same time and talk about which one's better. Julian,
I'll get Ryan Puglisi. Ryan Puglisi's him. Pugga.
Maybe send him a DM. See what happens.
Okay, I'll send him a DM. See what happens.
All right. Well, with that, boys and ladies, roll Tide.
Go Dogs.